أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. The name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His greatest peace and blessings upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We praise Allah for all the blessings He has given us, and the greatest blessing being that He allowed us to be of the ones who remain steadfast, dedicated, and loyal on the path of our Master after the Prophet, the commander of the faithful, the prince of the believers, the protector of the Prophet and his message, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We praise Allah for this blessing and every blessing, for without Allah we would have nothing. Assalamu alaikum, dear respected brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're going to be continuing our discussions on the vision of a virtuous community, and we've come a long way to this point. Here we've gotten to a point where we're discussing the idea of active integration into the societies that we are living in. And this was part and parcel to the vision of the virtuous community that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam had for us. Now, when it comes to this idea of active integration into their communities, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and their followers, they protected themselves, they protected their beliefs, and they benefited the state of the community, the society, and humanity at large. They emphasized key components and key conduct that came into them actively integrating into their communities, into the society that they were living in. Of those components we're going to be covering today is this idea of being a model citizen, coexistence, and then making sure we understand the idea of proselytizing, and is that something that we accept in our faith or not? We'll find that understanding the doctrines of coexistence, taqiyya specifically, in this discussion of coexistence, and then this idea of pushing one's belief onto others, if that's accepted in our faith tradition, in our school of thought or not. We're going to go into the following questions in this discussion as we have a better understanding of what active integration actually looks like. The following questions we're going to be covering are as follows. What is the step-by-step code for model citizenship as prescribed to us by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam? Secondly, what does coexistence mean? How does it look like? Third, what is taqiyya? And who was the first person to actually practice taqiyya? Fourth, what is taqiyya mudaratiyya? And how does it contribute to coexistence? Fifth and finally, do Shia Muslims, or in Shia Islam, do we believe in proselytizing? This is inshallah going to be a very interesting conversation, and I hope we're all following along to see how we can benefit from this and how this applies day to day in our lives. Again, taking this from the principles and the understanding of what Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam set in motion for us, that movement that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam had and still have today with our living 12th Imam, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, we're going to jump into the first question of what is the step-by-step code for model citizenship as prescribed by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. How did they want us to be role models in the communities and the societies that we lived in? Well, first, we start off from a verse from the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 33, verse 21, there is certainly a good exemplar for you in the apostle of God, for those who look forward to Allah and the last day and remember Allah much. This verse in the Holy Quran giving us the emphasis here that the Holy Prophet, he himself was an exemplar. He was that individual that people look to as an example in all things. People trusted him and believed in him as an individual, even before they believed in him as a message, because of his conduct, because of his ethics, because he was truly a model citizen, a Samaritan, if you will, in some terms, an individual that people would look to and would trust their belongings with, their wealth with, their family with, and they knew that when it came to him, they wouldn't be wronged. Now, there's a conversation that takes place between one of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Safwan ibn Yahya, and this is narrated in Wasa'il al-Shia. The conversation is the Imam telling Safwan to deliver regards to whoever it is that follows us and obeys us, as in Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. The Imams, you'll see a number of times, they will tell one of their companions to deliver news to other people that were their followers as well. Because at times, as we'll see throughout Shia history has been characteristic with persecution, with oppression, with injustices, with the community being marginalized by the ruling authorities that they lived under, whether it be through the Umayyad dynasty, the Umayyad Empire, the Abbasid Empire, the Ottoman Empire, dictatorships of the past couple hundred years or so. These are all different places where the Shia, for the most part, have endured some type of persecution or marginalization under different governments, under different regimes. And Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, 1,200 years ago, they were able to still communicate with their followers even with all of these situations that they faced. One of the communications is as follows. Imam al-Sadiq tells Safwan, he says, deliver this news to whoever follows us and obeys us. He said, I want you to do the following. I advise you to practice piety before God Almighty. I want you to fear God in your religion and strive in the way of God. Third, be truthful in your words. Fourth, deliver the trusts that have been entrusted to you, whether virtuous or to a sinner. So the individual that's entrusting you something, whether the individual is virtuous or a sinner, I want you to deliver the trusts and make sure those trusts are taken care of. The messenger of God would command to deliver back the remainder of a sewing thread and the needle along with the sewn garment. So if someone was to merely sew a garment, the sewing thread that's remaining of it and the needle itself should be returned as well, emphasizing on how much that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, would look at, even if it's something so insignificant in some people's eyes, he would still return it. He would still make sure that people, what was theirs was taken care of and was entrusted back to them. Fifth, prolong in your prostration. Sixth, be good neighbors. 7, be in touch with your people, attend their funerals, visit their ill, and fulfill their rights. If you did all of these things, Imam al-Sadiq says, if you did all of these things, you would be called a Ja'fari. A Ja'fari at that time, and then moving forward, would be those individuals, those followers of Ahlul Bayt that were prescribed to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. From the jurisprudential schools of thought, Ja'fari meant those were the 12 Shias who would become the 12 Shias, that in their school of thought, they're going back to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam in compared to the other 4 madhahib of jurisprudence. Now, when you're referring in this sense, Imam al-Sadiq is taking this personally, saying that you would be called Ja'fari. This would please me, and it would bring me great happiness. That people would say that these are the manners of Ja'far. And if a person was not like that from my followers, this would sadden me. And I would be ashamed by this individual, as they will then go on to say that these are the manners of Ja'far. Now imagine the Imam, in this instance, giving you a part of his heart, telling you what it means for you to be associated with him. These 7 things, quickly going over them again. Piety before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fearing God and our religion, striving in the way of God, being truthful, being honest, delivering trust, prolonging in our prostration, being good neighbors, and staying in touch with people, checking on them, visiting them when they're ill, going to their funerals, and fulfilling their rights. In that, we would be Ja'fari. If we're not, and people look at us as followers of Ahlul Bayt, and we're not doing this, then that is going to go against the reputation of the Imam himself, and he didn't want that. Moving forward, the Imam actually says in this narration, he continues, He said, by God, my father told me that if a person was a part of a tribe and he is a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would be the best amongst that tribe. He would be the best amongst that group of people. He would be the most trustworthy. He would be the most upright in fulfilling people's rights. He would be the most truthful. People would entrust him with their wills and their wealth. And when people would ask about him, they would say, who is like him? There's nobody that's like him. He is the most trustworthy and the most truthful amongst us. So even as we exist as minorities in the communities or societies that we live in, it should be that if people know our faith and people know who we are, they look at us without even a second thought, but know that that colleague in the office, you're the best of colleagues. That school that you're in, you're the best of students or the best of teachers or the best of professors. In that neighborhood, you're the best neighbor. Who's like him? There's nobody like him. He's the most trustworthy and the most truthful amongst us. Now, in this sequence of narrations, there's another one that says from one of the companions of the Imam, his name is Sulaiman. He says that there was a group of Shia followers of the Imam Sadiq, again in this situation, that were sitting with him. And then he tells them, he says, Ya ma'ashir al-Shia, Ya ma'ashir al-Shia, كونوا لنا زينا ولا تكونوا علينا شينا قولوا للناس حسنا واحفظوا ألسنتكم. O Shia, be an adornment, a good reflection to us, and do not be a disgrace upon us. Speak kindly to people and preserve your tongues. Now, these are basic instructions, step by step, as in how do you be a role model Shia, a role model citizen in the community that you're living in? How does the Imam expect you to behave and act, especially if you're one who's associating and affiliating with Ahlul Bayt? Now, second question, when we're coming into the idea of coexistence, what does coexistence look like and what does it mean in this context? Now, the principle of coexistence is one that we are with others and engaging in our community in a way where we are not a threat to other people. That's an important concept for us to keep in mind. Coexistence is part and parcel to our understanding of active integration. And it's not merely tolerating the presence of others, but rather it means that we are engaging with others and we're seeking to understand people. The best way for an individual to be understood is by seeking to understand others. Seek to understand in order to be understood. One of the principles of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a highly recommended self-help or self-development book that you can look into. Now, when it comes more specifically about the Shia experience in coexistence in the different communities and societies that they lived in, of course, Shia throughout history faced persecution, like we mentioned, whether it was under the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Ottomans, the different despotic regimes, colonialism, etc., etc., etc. There are different experiences that the Shia had, and maybe they wanted to coexist, but the other people didn't necessarily want to coexist. So in those situations, how do we act? How do we behave? Well, we find that in those situations, it's important for us to look into our history and read a little bit more about those experiences. One book that I highly recommend for you to look into is the book called The Shia by Sayyid Riyad al-Hakim. It's a nice overview, a basic book that gives you a solid understanding of the history of the Shia, the persecutions that they faced as a group in different places around the world. If you look up this book, The Shia by Sayyid Riyad al-Hakim, it will give you a better understanding to see the different political motivations that the different regimes had in persecuting Shia and the atrocities that took place and what happened across history. There wasn't just a specific period of time in which the Shia community as a minority was being oppressed or the injustices that they had. Both during the time of the 11 Imams, from the start of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam, all the way into post-occultation, or the post-era of the post period of time of after the minor occultation with Imam al-Mahdi, peace and blessings be upon him. These are important things for us to understand. Why? Because you and I, brothers and sisters, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, as spiritual, as people that are prescribing to the spiritual path, we also inherit a spiritual heritage. And that spiritual heritage had consequences of being ones who were part of the school of thought. Now, like we said, the persecution that the Shia faced came very early in history, immediately after the death of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and then would rise monumentally through the rise of the Umayyads, and even with the Abbasids, even though the Abbasids came with a campaign of being avengers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam against the Umayyads and against the atrocities that they committed. Now, in all of this, in understanding how active integration can take place with the doctrine of coexistence being manifested both in a realistic and practical way, there's something that we need to understand, which is into the third question, the idea of taqiyya, right? With taqiyya being the understanding of this pious dissimulation, as is said in English. A good translation of it is pious dissimulation, which when we're looking at it, basically it comes to in situations where your life is being threatened or the life of others is being threatened, then you are to conceal your faith or parts of your faith in order to preserve your life, in order to preserve the lives of others. Remember that one of the basic, most fundamental objectives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, as we've discussed previously, is preserving the faith and preserving the faithful. When we're saying preserving the faithful, that means preserving the lives of other human beings, especially when it comes to your own, your family, your community. Those lives, especially in situations where you can save them by mere concealment of your faith, that is being threatened at the whims of oppressors, of individuals that are persecuting minorities. In this situation, we're discussing Shia minorities. Then the only reasonable and logical option to follow is to conceal one's faith in order to preserve one's life or the lives of others. And this is not something that came as a practical reaction to make sure that Shia Muslims would not go extinct throughout history, but rather this came as a prophetic tradition, that the start of taqiyya, the practice of taqiyya, came in the early days of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And one of the earliest cited examples of that came with one of the close companions of the Prophet, who was one of the earliest Muslims, and his name was Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar ibn Yasir was considered to be one of the greatest companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and of Imam Ali salam and Ahlul Bayt. After accepting Islam, Ammar became a new target of the Meccans. And by Meccans, we're referring to the pagans of Mecca, the chieftains of Quraysh, those who were being threatened by this new society that the Prophet was building with people coming into Islam. They were threatened, so they would go and persecute Muslims. And Ammar was one of their new targets. So this gang of Meccans found Ammar one day, and they took him and they beat him to a pulp. They beat Ammar so bad and they tortured him so bad that he was covered in wounds. He was bruised black and blue all over his body. They wanted one thing from Ammar. They wanted him to recant his faith. They wanted him to say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Muhammad. So Ammar, in that situation, they beat him so bad until a point where he was truly going to die. And they really didn't care, because at the end of the day, it would be one less Muslim to them, one less person who believes in this new faith that's threatening our entire way of society. So they beat him so bad until Ammar actually said, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Muhammad. And they let Ammar go. The narration tells us that Ammar would run to the Prophet, run to the house of the Prophet, and he would come crying and telling him of the situation, that he was devastated, that he had to come to a point where he would say that I don't believe in God and I don't believe in Muhammad. At that point, the Prophet, hearing what Ammar told him and the devastating story that he just experienced, He asked Ammar, Ammar, that's what you said. But what is in your heart, Ammar? You said that you did not believe. But what's in your heart? He told the Prophet that, yes, I did say that. But in my heart is full of belief. And I would never recant my faith. I would never go back to disbelief. At that point, the verse from the Holy Quran was revealed to the Prophet and was shared with the Prophet, and the Prophet shared with Ammar. In the Holy Quran, in verse 16 or verse 106 from chapter 16, he says, accepting someone who is compelled to recant his faith while his heart is at rest in it. This was a reference to Ammar, who practiced this principle of taqiyya, which was to conceal your faith in order to preserve your life, so that what? You do not die at the whim of a tyrant, that you do not die at the whim of somebody who just seeks to oppress you and take away your rights. Now, we have numerous traditions, numerous narrations telling us the significance of taqiyya from the perspective of Ahlul Bayt and how they looked at the practice of taqiyya. Look at the following verses, or look at the following narrations. On numerous occasions, Imam al-Sadiq was found to speak about taqiyya. Of the things that he said about taqiyya, about pious dissimulation, concealing one's faith in order to protect and preserve and save one's life and the lives of other people, showing the sanctity of human life, emphasized by the Holy Prophet Muhammad saying that the sanctity of the believer is greater than the sanctity of the Kaaba itself. In preservation of this principle and implementing this in our lives, the Imams emphasize taqiyya, sanctioned by the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, with his companions and the early Muslims. At-taqiyyatu dini wa dinu abai. Taqiyya is my religion and the religion of my forefathers. اتقوا على دينكم واحجبوه بالتقية فإنه لا إيمان لمن لا تقية له. Safeguard your religion and protect it with taqiyya. Surely there is no faith for a person who does not have taqiyya. There is no faith for one who does not have taqiyya. And another one, ما عبد الله بشيء أفضل من التقية. God has not been worshipped with anything better than taqiyya. Now, again, there may be some misconceptions regarding taqiyya, which is that followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam lie about their beliefs, lie to get certain things in the situations that they're in, that it's basically a blank check for them to be able to deceive people, to lie, to cheat, etc., etc. And that is the farthest from the truth. Taqiyya is used, again, from the times of the Holy Prophet with the Muslims in a situation where someone is persecuting you, wanting to kill you, take your life, wanting to harm you, your family, or any of these extreme situations. At-taqiyya, in this sense of concealing our faith, that's used to preserve life. Why? The sanctity of life in Islam is at the highest level. Sanctity of life in Islam is like no other. The Prophet, like we just said, says that the sanctity of the life of a believer is greater than the Kaaba itself. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the one who's killed a soul, has killed one human being, is as if he has killed all of humanity. And the one who saves one soul, one human being, is as if he has saved all of humanity. Look at the beauty in that. Are we, in our positions, going to be ones who are going to disagree with the preservation and the sanctity of life? Absolutely not. And that's why the Imams emphasize that man la taqiyata lah, la dina lah. Whoever does not have taqiyya and does not accept this as a practice in their life and a doctrine of their belief, then they truly don't have religion. Look at this next story when it comes to Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, showing the practice of taqiyya by the Imam himself. Now remember, with Imam Zayn al-Abidin, this was the Imam that survived the tragedy of Karbala. This was the man who watched his father, his uncles, his brothers, his cousins, and his companions slaughtered and killed, massacred before him. This is the man who watched the women and children of Karbala be whipped, beaten, and tortured physically, emotionally, psychologically, on all levels. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam is back in Medina. When there were revolts taking place, as historians would recount, the revolts that would take place across Hijaz, especially in Medina, the Umayyads wanted to quell all of the revolts that were taking place against the Umayyads, against Yazid. Because after Ashura, after the tragedy of Karbala, some people went into an upheaval and revolts were taking place. Of course, there were different motivations at the time. There were individuals that were seeking vengeance for Imam Hussein. And then there were certain individuals that were also taking advantage of the situation and wanting to challenge the Umayyads, because the Umayyads at that time, they weren't necessarily in the most stable political helm with Yazid at top. So with the revolts that were taking place, the Umayyad commander Muslim ibn Uqba is instructed to go and quell the revolts and take allegiance from the people of Medina. So when Muslim ibn Uqba came in, he had a policy. His policy was, we're not just going to take allegiance from people, we're going to humiliate people. He wanted to make sure that when people gave their allegiance, that they gave allegiance saying, we are not only ones who follow Yazid and take him as our commander of the faithful or our prince or our leader, our khalifa, but rather he would only take concessions in people saying that we are slaves and chattel or property of Yazid. Whoever did not concede to that was simply beheaded. Now, in Medina, this is where Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam lives. This is the home of Ahlul Bayt, the home of the Prophet's family. In the tumultuous scene that was taking place, these soldiers at the command of Musab ibn Uqba, this Umayyad commander, they are taking people by the sword and forcing them to give allegiance to Yazid. Imam Zayn al-Abidin sees this and he goes to Muslim ibn Uqba. And just imagine the scene as our Imam, the son of Imam al-Hussein, again, the one who just witnessed the tragedy of Karbala. He goes to Muslim ibn Uqba and he tells him, how would Yazid like for me to give my oath of allegiance? Muslim ibn Uqba, shocked, he responds in reverence of the Imam. He says, to give allegiance as a brother and as a cousin is all. The Imam responds and he says, yet if you wished, I would pledge allegiance as a slave and as chattel. Muslim ibn Uqba humbly responds, he said, I would not burden you with this, O Ali. Now, why did Imam Zayn al-Abidin respond to the situation and actually initiate for himself to give allegiance to Muslim ibn Uqba or to Yazid through Muslim ibn Uqba and say, you guys are taking allegiance by one saying that he is slave and chattel of Yazid? Sure, I'll give allegiance that way. Why? The Imam was showing that this allegiance is invalid, void, null and void to begin with, because allegiance is a contract. And unless there's mutual assent on both sides that is not being coerced, it's null and void as a legal principle. And the Imam is doing what here? Is showing that they're trying to coerce this, they're trying to take your life. Again, most of the situations of taqiyya is this aspect of coercion or fear of harm on one's life and one's safety and one's family's life and safety. In this situation, the Imam was seeing this entire community being coerced into allegiance. He would show them by their conduct. He would tell basically people, and they were watching, observing, this is Ali ibn Hussein. He would basically tell them, listen, we're not going to die at the whims of tyrants. What happened in Karbala was unique. This was al-Hussein saving the religion as the last resort in his conduct and what he did. The movement of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam is one that needs to be understood across history. Imam Zayn al-Abidin practiced taqiyya in this situation to save his life, to save the life of his family, to save the lives of the believers.
that do not die at the whims of this tyrant. Al-Hussein gave the sacrifice in Karbala. That was the greatest sacrifice that was made and was unique to him as the Imam of his time and as one who assessed the situation to dictate that need. One that was not dictated on the Imams before him or the Imams after him. Again, so important to understand this within the context that the Imams lived in and see how you and I understand the movement of Ahlul Bayt. Two books that are fundamental in building this understanding is Thawrat al-Hussein, translated into English, called Hussein's Revolution by Sheikh Mahdi Shamsuddin, and then also Faji'at al-Taf, translated into English, Understanding Karbala by Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim. Both fundamental books and getting a better understanding and a picture of the way how you would see Imam Zain al-Abidin practice taqiyya in this situation after the tragedy of Ashura of Karbala, and how Imam al-Hussein would be in his situation and previously following the policy of his brother Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam with the peace treaty that he struck with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. All of this not contradictory to one another, all of this coming in line with the vision and mission of Ahlul Bayt to preserve the faith and preserve the faithful. Now, moving forward, brothers and sisters, when it comes to these principles that we're discussing and understanding how taqiyya plays into the lives of the Imams and our lives today, there's also more practical and more or simpler practices of taqiyya that come to the concept of at-taqiyya al-mudaratiyya, right? So there's also an idea within the doctrine of coexistence that we have as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Those taqiyya examples that we mentioned, life and death, very serious situations. But there's also a concept of taqiyya al-mudaratiyya, which basically refers to not necessarily pushing all of one's beliefs at the forefront all the time. Or it could be even more specifically, not necessarily the beliefs, but the practices. Or in certain discussions, raising certain things or not raising certain things. And the idea of a taqiyya al-mudaratiyya, and mudaratiyya coming from mudarat, which is basically for one to be conscientious and sensitive towards others, is this idea that in less serious situations, in order to build more harmony in a community, you're observant of other people's sensitivities. You're observant of other people's preconceived notions that maybe at this time, because people don't have a full understanding or a solid understanding of our beliefs and our practices, whether it be as a school of thought, as Shia Muslims, or generally as Muslims, you may not push certain things at the forefront to avoid other people feeling threatened or other people misunderstanding. Some practical examples of this include playing the adhan on loudspeakers during Fajr in your neighborhood, whether it be at your home or in your mosque, right? And at times during the year, Fajr can be as early as 4 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of people are sleeping at that time. And you may be living in a community that you're the only Muslim, or you're a small group of Muslims in that community that is not Muslim. That anything playing on loudspeaker, no matter how beautiful it is, disrupting someone's sleep could definitely be a nuisance to people. And if you're associated as being a nuisance, that definitely is not contributing to your contribution to that society or that community, and could be one where you're annoying people. And that annoyance that you're providing in that situation could harm your situation as a member of that community and as a citizen of that society. It's important for us to keep in mind that people's impressions, not that we are dictated by them, but we put them in consideration into our behavior, into our conduct. Another example of this could be, for example, praying in large groups at public settings like an airport, right? When it may not be necessary for one to pray at the airport in a group. Of course, you have to pray. At this time of the prayer, you pray. You may find a reflection room. If they don't have a reflection room, you find a corner for you to pray in, and be one who is not threatening of other people. One may say, what's threatening about a prayer? some people misunderstand it and associate it with certain preconceived notions that comes from a complex ignorance. But you and I, regardless of what is right and what is wrong, we know we are right to pray. We have the freedom to pray, the freedom to speak, the freedom to express ourselves in any which way, right? Especially living in democratic societies and democratic countries like the United States and others, right? We have the constitutional liberties for freedom of religion, freedom of expression, etc. However, just because I have the freedom to do something doesn't necessarily mean that I should. Just because I can speak about something doesn't necessarily mean I should. Just because I can do something doesn't mean I should. Why? Because again, from this doctrine of taqiyya mudaratiyya, which I have to be considerate of my surroundings, that all the time Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and their companions and their followers were always thinking about how things were perceived and how the Shia were positioned by that perception. People will have certain positions with us, and it's important for us to make sure that we position ourselves in the best way possible given the circumstances. Why? The point is we want to protect ourselves, safeguard ourselves, safeguard our community, and make sure that our families in the next generations continue to grow in communities in which that they can practice their faith and their belief to the greatest extent possible without being a threat to others. You see, if we're a threat to other communities, then other communities will not have an interest in protecting us. If we as a minority in whatever society we're living in do not take an interest in protecting and safeguarding others, then people won't take an interest in safeguarding and protecting us. If we're not considerate of others, people won't be considerate of us. And we see this, by the way, practically playing out in alliances that are built across the world in different faith communities. That when a Muslim looks for the interests of his Christian neighbor and make sure that a church who they didn't have a space to pray in, they would provide them the means or the ability to do so, regardless of the situation, regardless of the difference in beliefs. But they, at the end of the day, looked at it as this is my neighbor, and I want to make sure that just like I want a place to pray in, I want a place to pray in, I want to make sure that they have a place to pray in. That's very strategic, both from a human level of you taking care of your own heart and the hearts of others, but at the same time, you making sure that as a community, you're helping others so that you may be helped in your time of need as well. We'll go into the final question being, in Shia Islam, and Islam generally, but more specifically from the perspective of the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, do we believe in proselytizing people? Do we believe in this idea of actively going out and converting people to our faith or our school of thought? Now, what did Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam give us in this? Did they do this? Did they instruct their followers to do this? What's the prescription of the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam for them to follow in the situation of, I want to go out and I want to convert people. I want people to become Shia. I want people to become Muslim. I want people. Is that something that's part of our faith tradition? Here's a conversation between Abu Basir, one of the companions of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, on the subject with the Imam. He asked the Imam, he said, should I go out and preach to the people that I know? He's not saying to people that are, he's not going door to door to people that he doesn't know. He says, should I go out and to preach to people that I don't know? Or often, the people that I do know. The Imam replied in the negative. He said, no, don't. He said, what if someone sought my guidance? Should I then in that situation? Then the Imam replied and he said, whoever seeks your guidance, guide him. And if he seeks more, give him more. But if he turns away, then turn away. In another situation, Imam al-Baqir's son, Imam al-Sadiq, was asked by Thabit bin Sa'id. In this situation, the Imam also tells him about this idea of speaking to people and proselytizing. He says, O Thabit, what do you have with the people? Leave the people alone. Do not call anyone onto your faith, as in, do not try to convert people to your faith. By God, if the denizens of the heavens and the denizens of the earth all rally to misguide a servant who God wishes to guide, they would not be able to misguide him. Guidance is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Trying to force someone into a belief of yours is not going to happen. And Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam did not prescribe this. Then we finally come to this hadith where we bring it all together, as we've mentioned so many times before, but seeing it now full picture. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, كونوا دعاة لنا بغير ألسنتكم. Be callers towards the faith without using your tongues. Let people see in you the fear of God, commitment, prayer, and virtue, as that is the method of calling to our faith. We end with this, brothers and sisters, having answered the questions of today, having answered all of these subjects, and making sure that we have a better understanding of this active integration into the communities and societies that we're living in, understanding the importance of model citizenship, coexistence, taqiyya, and the prohibition essentially of proselytization. We've answered what was the step-by-step code for model citizenship provided by the Imam, what does coexistence mean, what is taqiyya and who was the first to practice it, what is taqiyya mudaratiyya and how does this contribute to coexistence, and finally the belief and understanding that we do not go and proselytize people, we don't actively go and try to convert people, but instead we are as we are, and if people want to come to faith and to guidance, that is by their choice and by the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على نبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.